There are forces of good and forces of evil at work in the world today. What are these forces? Who is responsible for the good? And who is responsible for the evil? Richard Schaff talks about current events which are rarely discussed by the mainstream media, events that affect us all. This program seeks to identify, to inform, and to equip the believer for what's ahead. Welcome to What in the World is Going On?
This is What in the World is Going On. I'm your host, Richard Schaff. The program is sponsored by LincolnlogHomes. We're pro-Christian, pro-American, pro-life, pro-Second Amendment, and here by the grace of God. I hope that some of you, or many of you, got to watch the GOP convention. I did. Personally, I found it very refreshing, inspiring, uplifting. And boy, it made one proud to be an American. You know, that was a real professional job, and it was kind of done at the last minute. Our local Democrat governor, Cooper, here in North Carolina, had done everything possible to stand in the way of the Republican convention being held here. But it was held initially here and then transferred to Washington. It was a professionally done job. Made me so proud all the way through. Professionally done. Last minute planning. Anyway, pulled a couple of reports I want to share with you on the convention. First one I want to bring you attention to is one by Monica Showalter. And she notes, a rage cat GOP convention with a fierce message of fight. Kind of thought that summed it up. Anyway, to start with her report, I'm going to reference some material from there. She notes that the GOP is famous for its civility, its reasoned arguments, its uplifting messages, its 1,000 points light of light, its dowdy flag waving. Historically, the Republican convention has always been a bit of anti-climax to the more rambunctious version from the Democrats. Not this time, good listeners. What stood out from this convention was not its uplift, which was there, of course, but boy, that rage cat fury, its fight. The GOP is getting angry. I could think of a street expression, but I won't use it. But it was positive anger, one that explicitly targeted the left and for all its lies, while several speakers explicitly denounced socialism. First, there was the myth-busting former NFL football star, Herschel Walker. Well, he had a dynamic speech. He decried the repeated media lies that President Trump is a racist. He said, it hurt my soul to hear the terrible names that people call Donald. The one is racist. That was the worst one. I take that's a personal insult that people would think I've had a 37-year relationship with a racist. That's a direct quote from Herschel Walker. Also notable were the COVID first responders, ordinary people who did extraordinary things at the outbreak of the virus. Those were whom Trump spoke with in one segment, while more fiery GOP representatives sought to debunk the left's lies that Trump mismanages the COVID pandemic. You know, I've said this before on this broadcast. If there was a cure for cancer, and Trump were the one that did it, they would disallow it. Anything he says is going to be disallowed by our leftist media. One leader took decisive actions to save lives, and that was President Donald Trump. You see, he banned travel from China and the centers of the coronavirus. Biden charged him to being xenophobic, but President Trump was right. Signing the CARES Act, providing immediate relief to American families, workers, and businesses, was a big plus. He declared a national emergency. He tapped into $42 billion in existing emergency funding, quickly getting critical personnel protective equipment to the states. We put up hospitals. He sent in two of our Navy ships, hospital ships. Turns out all this stuff wasn't needed. But boy, those Dems wanted it. And he gave it to them, including the respirators. They want to destroy our country and everything that we fought for and hold dear. They wanted to steal your liberty, your freedom. They want to control what you see and think. And they want to control what you believe. You know why? So that they can control how you live. Well, that was a quote from one of our speakers at the convention. Yes. Continuing, don't let the Democrats and their socialist comrades take you for granted. That was just one example of the type of speeches that we had at the convention. Oh, we had Donald Trump Jr. Boy, he did a great job, didn't he? He called the would-be takeovers desiring leftists a rotten cabal. He blasted the Democrat double standards on rioting and looting. People of faith are under attack, he noted. You're not allowed to go to church, but mass chaos in the streets gets a pass. It's almost like this election is shaping up to be church work and school versus rioting, looting, and vandalism. Or in the words of Biden and the Democrats, peaceful protesting. Anarchists have been flooding our streets, and Democrat mayors are ordering the police to stand down. Small business across America, many of them minority-owned, are being torched by the mobs. The Democrat mayors pretend it's not happening. They actually called it a summer of love, you know. And then we had a message from Jim Jordan. Boy, I love that guy, U.S. rep from up in Ohio. He noted that while they're doing all this, they're also trying to take away your guns. Look at the positions they've taken in the past few months. Democrats won't let you go to church, but they'll let you protest. Democrats won't let you go to work, but boy, you can riot, can't you? And Democrats won't let you go to school, but they'll let you go to loot. Those are the words of Jim Jordan. God bless him. Remember the McCloskeys? That was that couple that stood in front of their house and didn't want the mob to take it over, and they came out with some guns. A couple of pretty heavy ones, too. Well, they were eloquent at the convention. She warned, Mrs. McCloskey, what you saw happen to us could just as easily happen to you. Her husband issued the following edgy warning. You know, all they want is power. True, folks. They want to take your guns first, then they'll take the rest. Andrew Pollack, that was the father of the Parkland shooting victim, Meadow Pollack. Boy, he was a solid rage cat. One of the most effective speakers that was there, according to many reports and mine personally. This was according to the New York Post, which devoted an entire article to him, and a gripping speech in support of Donald Trump. The father of Parkland shooting victim, Meadow Pollack, accused Barack Obama and Joe Biden of forcing flawed restorative justice policies into our schools, this leading to his teen daughter's death, her murder, in 2018. Speaking at the 2020 Republican National Convention kickoff, also at that time, that's when they brought in Andrew. And he zeroed in on what he said were the far-left Democrats. He said they were in the Marjorie Stonewood Douglas High School District in Parkland, Florida. And boy, he praised Trump for his action. We also had former U.S. Ambassador in South Carolina, Nikki Haley. She was graceful, had some very good things to say about our position in the United Nations. Many, many great speakers. There were beautiful speeches. One of the best, I thought, was from Senator Tim Scott. He talked about the freed hostages expressing gratitude, and many others. There was also, one of my favorites was bone cancer survivor Natalie Harp, who spoke on the life-saving help she got from President Trump for his right to try law for terminal patients. She noted she wouldn't be alive today if he hadn't done it. Without you, I would have died, she stated. I would have died waiting for the trials to be approved. She said this speaking of how bad the odds were of her survival. She noted they were so low that no one would even allow her into their clinical test. They didn't want the results to go down. He got it approved. She did, and she's still alive. Yes, there was an uplift in these speeches, But I like the fighting quality best, the rage cat feeling of it. This is a GOP that intends to fight. We're going to have to fight, folks, and I think we've got some that are willing to. Another article came to me from Michael Goodwin, and he notes that Trump goes scorched earth in the RNC 2020 acceptance speech. He did. How grateful. On day 4, there was no more Mr. Nice Guy. Republicans spent the better part of 3 nights of that convention presenting softer and gentler sides of President Trump. But the president got the final words, and he came out last Thursday in a fighting mode. Personally, that's why I love him so much. His acceptance speech detailed his success and offered promises aplenty for a second term, but the emphasis and energy were committed to a scorched earth attack on Joe Biden and the Democrats. Trump threw so many punches to his opposition that if it had been a real heavyweight boxing match, the referee would have stopped it in the middle of it out of mercy. Give you a couple of samples from our president. This election will decide whether we save the American dream or whether we allow a socialist agenda to demolish our cherished destiny. He later said, and I quote, "How can the Democrat Party ask to lead our country when it spends so much time tearing down our country?" After saying Biden had buckled to the demands of the socialists to his party, Trump asked, if he can't stand up to them, how is he going to stand up for you? Many of the lines echoed Ronald Reagan, and the two men share a lot of the key traits, perhaps the most important being a willingness to take on a Washington from the inside without ever losing their outside perspective. If there were any doubt, last Thursday night settled the question of whether 4 more years in the White House have warmed Trump's heart to the Beltway. Certainly it hasn't. Instead, he detailed numerous examples of where he believed he was fighting the entire establishment just to get things done for the American people. This including standing up against China's theft of jobs, intellectual property, and stopping illegal immigration. In his mind, he's often a lonely warrior. Yeah, I would agree with that, folks. Personally, I can't see how he can do it. Sometimes it seems like the world's against him. Maybe it is, but not completely. While Reagan's folksy charm belied a core of steely conviction, Trump generally prefers to dispense with the niceties and get down to business. In other words, folks, he tells it like it is. And make no mistake, Thursday's speech was all business. He came not to debate Joe Biden, but to bury him. And he did. On the merits, it was an effective argument on every front, from the economy to foreign policy to law and order. The routine was for Trump to cite his own first-term accomplishments as more than Biden had done in 47 years in Washington. Job well done, Mr. President. Job well done. Ivanka Trump, in introducing her father, casually noted that his communications, quote, are not to everyone's taste, end quote, and added his tweets can feel unfiltered. Of course, the acknowledgement was aimed at giving people permission to support the president despite their misgivings. Moreover, the campaign long ago learned that Trump will be Trump and made its bet that the public will put results over any qualms about style, taste, and personality. While on the speech on the White House lawn had a rally feel, and it did, its attacks on Biden were substantive and policy-based. While Democrats want the election to be about the president's handling of the virus, another key issue has emerged that could prove much more decisive. The riots, the looting, the crime that's surging in the nation's cities have become a flashpoint. You see, most all of these cities, if not all, of our larger cities where these riots are occurring, are Democrat-controlled. Can you just visualize what the situation we'd like? Put Biden and Harris in Washington at the head of our government. They appoint our cabinet, including including our department heads, our Attorney General. Oh, wouldn't that be wonderful? Wouldn't it be wonderful? You can see the mobs. You saw them outside the White House right after the convention. You saw people attacked. You saw Rand Paul and his wife mobbed. If it hadn't been for some help coming up, they could have easily been killed. They were on television, you know. You saw what happened there. We had a black U.S. representative from Georgia, a Democrat that had spoken there. He was mobbed. Libby Albert, yeah, she spoke. Former Democrat, now officially heading up Walk Away. Walk Away? That's the Democrats that are walking away to support Donald Trump. You saw this. You saw it. Biden says never would he use new U.S. National Guard forces for props. How sweet, how tender, how loving. That's what we don't need at this time. One reason for all the riots in nearly all of the cities that are run by Democrat mayors. Another is that Biden and the party didn't say a single word about the destruction at their convention. Instead, they embraced Black Lives Matter and treating the protesters as New Age heroes. By the way, that mob outside the White House following the convention, it wasn't all blacks, folks. Don't think it's all that are blacks. We had thugs. It was a mob. According to our Senator Rand Paul, he's of the opinion that many of them were brought in and paid money. He said they came in out of state. He's calling for an investigation. I'd like to see the results of that. Trump and the GOP have been jumping on every air ever since the Democrats have passed on the mobs. And it became a massive force at the convention. The president cited it numerous times that night as another disqualifying action or inaction by his opponent. And sure enough, as soon as the convention was over and his guests started to leave, you saw what was waiting for him. All outside on the streets of Washington, D.C., oh, they also have a Democrat mayor, don't they? And she had failed to dispatch appropriate security. Already the polls have started to reflect public unease with the chaos. And while Dems had hoped that they would be able to use it as a reason to turn the tide against the president, they seem to realize now that they made a serious miscalculation. Biden has spoken out recently about the violence just since the convention. A clear sign that he sees the danger. Still, his words have been more pleading than the president's, who is eager to send in federal forces if local governments and police can't gain control of the streets. The spreading violence is scaring Americans everywhere, with the situation in Kenosha, Wisconsin, perhaps more frightening than what has been happening in Portland, Seattle, and elsewhere. You see, Kenosha is a city of only 100,000 people, and the violence there is all the more shocking than what is happening in much larger cities. In effect, Kenosha is something of every town. And the riots, arson, and murder could cause more people to identify with it and wonder if their town is next. By the way, as I bring this broadcast to you on this weekend, our president is scheduled to visit Kenosha next Tuesday. The issue now is undercutting a key feature of the Democrats' plan. They use their convention to portray Biden as if someone who feels the pain of others because he's suffered enormous personal tragedy. But Trump's trying to recast that quality as a weakness, saying that Biden is not tough enough to combat the current wave of lawlessness. In effect, the Trump team is asking, what would you rather have on your side in a street fight? A tough puncher like Trump or a guy like Biden who feels the opponent's pain? Before the convention, Biden had a significant lead in the polls. Well, that's changing now, and I'll be bringing you that shortly in this broadcast. The race is tightened, and this is a heavyweight match with many, many more rounds to go. And folks, I want to interject this at this point. What's at stake is not right versus left. It's not Republican versus Democrat. It's not just Trump versus Biden. It's not just freedom versus the slavery of socialism. It is satanic. It is satanic. It's the forces of hell against the God of heaven. Personally, that's why I am optimistic. Now to the report on this latest polling. 1 point separates Biden from Trump. A dead heat, 46-45. Former Vice President Joe Biden's lead over President Trump in the 2020 presidential race, once as high as 15 points in some polls, has been cut to just 1 point in the latest Rasmussen survey. The pollster, who is one of the most closely called in the 2016 popular vote, said that Biden is edging out Trump 46-45. Well, that's well within the margin of error. This is a dramatic change from its status by the same organization report last week when Biden led Trump 48-44. The survey comes on the heels of the Democrat National Convention that gave Biden no traditional bump in the polls, but before the release of anything to have to do with the Republican convention. It also comes the same day that the latest Zogby poll put Trump's approval rating at its highest ever, 52%. Now, let me share a portion of a report I got from you. Came to me from Mark Lansdom, titled The Christian Case for Trump. The world spends a lot of effort persuading people that evil is really something good. You know, the killing of babies in the womb, engaging in sexual perversion, confiscating of what belongs to someone to give it to someone it doesn't belong to. These are all evil acts, unless you ask the worldly. Donald Trump has done more for the cause of life, for religious liberty, for improved economic conditions of people of all races, for law and order, for ratcheting down overbearing government, for easing tax and regulation burdens, and a host of other good things. He's done more than any other president in my lifetime. Every candidate that I can think of has fallen short of the glory of God. The choice is, and always is, which candidate will do more good. That choice in November is obvious, especially given Trump's track record and the threatening promises of his opponent to renew Barack Obama's destructive transforming of America. Throughout history, God has used people to do great things, even to be his own disciples, whom the self-righteous wouldn't have chosen. Let's look at what one apostle wrote. Quote, "For consider your calling, brothers. Not many of you were wise according to worldly standards. Not many were powerful. Not many were of noble birth. But God chose what is foolishness in the world to shame the wise. God chose what is weak in the world to shame the strong. God chose what is low and despised of the world, even things that are not, to bring to nothing things that are, so that no human being might boast in the presence of God." That quote, folks, is from 1 Corinthians 1:26 through 29. If that's not a sufficient reminder, consider the roster of Christian Faith Hall, that Hall of Fame, as it were. It was enumerated in Hebrews 11:32. Christian author Gary DeMar reminds us that this is a list of bad guys that probably no political party would have nominated to be dog catcher. But God chose them. Gideon, an idolater. Barak, a coward. Samson, a womanizer, far worse than JFK or Bill Clinton. Jephthah, son of a prostitute who lived with a gang of scoundrels and made a reckless vow that cost his daughter her life. Samuel, a terrible father who raised evil sons. David, an adulterer and murderer. As has been the case for several election cycles now, this vote comes down to a pitiful time for our nation. It is very pitiful. It is a time of decision. Americans have clear-cut alternatives, big, invasive, dictating government will advance actual evil. Just take a look at the Dems party platform. Or voters can choose a continuation of the liberties and blessings delivered by a too often abrasive and obnoxious president who already has shown what great good he can deliver. Yes, Donald Trump is a fallen sinner, just like Gideon, David, Samuel, and the rest of us. But his track record is proof that he's clearly the better choice. This should be clear even for those inhibited, my friends, those inhibited by self-righteousness. And then, in closing, what's happened to the Republican Party? Well, maybe a bit of good. But anyway, it's Trump's party now. Who cares that Bush and the old guard didn't show up? That was a question answered by Donald Trump Jr. Donald Trump Jr., his father's top unelected surrogate, said who cares when asked in an interview about the lack of Bush-era officials. I'm thrilled, he said, that those people aren't here because I don't think they represent the party well anymore. Also missing were the Hollywood stars of the Democrat Party featured at their convention last week. We have real Americans living the American dream here. We're showcasing it now. Donald Trump Jr. said that the president has transformed the Republican Party to focus on Americans outside the Beltway, not insiders, and those who push globalist policies. Trump's winning shows you that these aren't the people who are relevant. If we wanted endless wars, if that's the thing people actually wanted, those people should be front and center if we want to send our kids off to far-off lands that when no one benefits from our policies, that no one in America agrees with other than the neocons, the Democrats, Joe Biden, and the D.C. Beltway, who've made themselves billionaires by sending our kids to foreign lands to fight wars that we can't ourselves tell us that we're even in, or the reason for our being there. He continued, honestly, I think we're sort of past that now. I think we have to move on. We have to represent the American people. We have to fight for America for a change, not our friends in D.C., not our buddies that run the military-industrial complex. We got to put an end to that. A quote from Donald Trump Jr. He also spoke during the virtual GOP convention last Tuesday and had the most memorable line so far when he dubbed Biden, and I quote, the Loch Ness Monster of the swamp. He said that in critiquing the former vice president 4 decades in Washington. Folks, we've talked consistently about this being a vital time, a pivotal election. It is. But again, it's not Republican against Democrat, liberal against conservative. It's not just Trump against Biden. It's not just our freedom, our democracy against socialism. It's a satanic battle. And I encourage you to join me in pleading to Almighty God in prayer that we will do all that we humanly can, including prayer, probably our most important thing, to bring across the continuation of our freedom, the preservation of our republic, the preservation of peace. And remember this, folks, if the lights of freedom go out in America, they will go out around the world. Goodbye for this broadcast. This program brought to you by LincolnlogHomes. I, your host in this program, am also the CEO of Lincoln Logs. I'm here to work with you, answer any questions if you have a log home or have questions about log homes. Dial me toll-free 800-848-3310. But even more important, good listeners, remember our country, remember our president, remember our republic in prayer.